April 2018. San Diego, California. 7 years. That is how long it took for the death of Rebecca Zahau to find its way into a courtroom. 7 years of grieving. 7 years of fighting. 7 years of phone calls to attorneys, petitions to government offices, interviews with journalists, and long nights staring at the ceiling wondering why. Why the system refused to look deeper. Why the official story felt so impossibly wrong. Why nobody in power seemed willing to ask the harder questions. And now, finally, a jury of 12 people was about to hear all of it. Not a criminal trial. Let's be very clear about that. The criminal case had been shut down, officially closed, stamped suicide, filed away back in September of 2011. What was happening in that San Diego courtroom in the spring of 2018 was a civil wrongful death trial. And the difference between those two things matters enormously. In criminal court, the prosecution must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the highest standard in the American legal system. It is intentionally difficult to meet. In civil court, the standard is lower. It only requires a preponderance of the evidence, meaning, is it more likely than not that this person caused this death? More than 50% likely. That's the bar. The Zahau family had spent 5 years building their case. 5 years of gathering evidence, hiring experts, taking depositions. And they had one specific defendant in their crosshairs. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Shadow, and this is the second part of Zahau case. Show us your support, and let's get into it. Jonah Shacknai's younger brother, the tugboat captain from Memphis, Tennessee. The man who had arrived in Coronado on a plane from the opposite side of the country just one day before Rebecca died. The man who had been alone with her at the Spreckles mansion overnight. The man who claimed he woke up that morning, walked outside, looked toward the mansion, and saw Rebecca's nude body hanging from the second-floor balcony. The man who says he is completely, absolutely, categorically innocent. The man who, after 6 weeks of testimony and forensic evidence, a jury found responsible for her death. But the story doesn't end with the verdict. In this case, in this infuriating, heartbreaking, maddening case, the story never ends. Before we step inside that courtroom, we need to understand who Adam Shacknai is. Because the prosecution would paint him as a calculating killer. The defense would paint him as a completely innocent man caught in an impossible situation. And the truth, as with everything in this case, sits somewhere in the space between those two portraits. Adam Shacknai grew up in Suffern, New York, alongside his older brother Jonah. By all accounts, a normal, stable childhood. The brothers were close. Jonah's ex-wife described their dynamic as like teenage boys who were always poking fun at each other. Adam described his big brother as someone who always had his back. While Jonah went on to build a billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire, Adam took a completely different path. He became a tugboat pilot on the Mississippi River in Memphis, Tennessee. Decades of working on the water, navigating cargo vessels, tying knots, reading currents. A working-class life, a quiet life, far removed from the $13 million mansions and private jets that defined his brother's world. He came to Coronado in July 2011 for one reason, and one reason only. His 6-year-old nephew, Max, was fighting for his life in a hospital after falling over a banister at the Spreckles mansion. Adam got on a plane and flew across the country to be with his brother in one of the worst moments of Jonah's life. Within 24 hours of landing in California, Rebecca Zahau would be dead. Adam's account of what happened that night has never changed. He and Rebecca returned to the mansion after having dinner with Jonah and a friend. The evening was quiet and subdued. Rebecca was grief-stricken over Max's accident. After they got home, Adam offered a few words of comfort. They said goodnight. He went to the guest house. He took an Ambien sleeping pill. He went to sleep. In the morning, he walked outside, looked toward the main house, and saw Rebecca hanging from the balcony. He called 911 immediately. Then he ran inside, grabbed a kitchen knife, cut the rope, lowered her body to the ground, and attempted CPR until the paramedics arrived. He did not hurt her. He did not know what happened to her. He was devastated by what he saw. That is his story. He told it in 2011. He told it at the civil trial in 2018. He has told it in every interview since. And it has never wavered. Not a single detail. But here is where the physical evidence becomes impossible to ignore. The Zahau family filed their wrongful death lawsuit in 2013, 2 years after Rebecca's death. 2 years of closed doors. The Attorney General who declined to review the case within 24 hours, the sheriff who stood firm on the suicide ruling, the medical examiner who signed off on it. Every official avenue exhausted. Every petition denied. So the family turned to civil court. Their attorney, Keith Greer, laid out a specific and detailed theory of the crime during opening statements. This is what he argued happened on the night of July 12th into the early morning of July 13th, 2011, at the Spreckels mansion. After Adam and Rebecca returned from dinner, at some point during the night, Adam confronted her. He attacked her. He delivered 4 separate blows to her head, strikes powerful enough to render her at least partially unconscious. While she was incapacitated, he sexually assaulted her using the kitchen knife found at the scene. He then used knots from his years of maritime experience to bind her wrists behind her back and tie her ankles together. He placed a noose around her neck and stuffed a shirt into her mouth as a gag. He either painted the message on the door himself, or forced her to, or applied the paint to her body after she was already restrained. Then he carried or dragged her to the balcony and threw her over the railing, the rope attached to the bedpost snapping taut as her body dropped 9 to 10 feet. After that, he waited. He went back to the guest house. He let some hours pass, and in the morning, he walked out as if he'd just discovered her for the first time. He called 911. He performed CPR. He played the role of a horrified witness. That is the accusation, argued openly in a court of law in front of a jury. Is it proven beyond a reasonable doubt? No, the criminal justice system never tested it to that standard. But in the civil court, after 6 weeks of evidence and expert testimony, 9 out of 12 jurors found this theory more likely than not to be true. Let's look at why. One of the most technically argued aspects of this entire case is the knots used to bind Rebecca's wrists and ankles. The family's attorney brought in Lindsay Philpott, a retired charter boat captain and certified forensic knot analyst, who testified that the overhand and clove hitch knots used to bind Zahau are knots commonly associated with nautical work. Maritime knots, the kind of knots that people who work on boats tie instinctively, without thinking, the way a carpenter might reach for a hammer. And who was the only other person at the Spreckels mansion that night who had spent decades working on the water? Adam Shacknai, tugboat captain, Mississippi River, 30 years of tying lines and securing vessels. The defense pushed back hard. The San Diego Sheriff's Department argued that Rebecca herself had some experience with boat knots. A defense knot expert testified that the knots were not uniquely nautical, that anyone could have tied them, that they were not the signature of a specialist. So the jury faced a direct choice, whose knot expert was more convincing. And ultimately, 9 of the 12 jurors sided with the family's argument. This is arguably the single most logically difficult detail to explain in Adam Shacknai's account. Adam told authorities that after cutting Rebecca down from the balcony, he administered CPR. Full CPR, chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He was in direct, sustained, intimate physical contact with her body for several minutes until paramedics arrived. And yet, investigators found not a single trace of Adam Shacknai's DNA anywhere on Rebecca's body. Not a skin cell, not a strand of hair, nothing identifiable from breath or saliva. 0. Cold case investigator Paul Holes put it plainly. Adam says that he gave Rebecca CPR after he cut her body down from the balcony, and yet none of his DNA is found anywhere on Rebecca's body. That right there is a mystery. CPR is one of the most physically intimate acts one person can perform on another. It involves sustained pressure, direct mouth contact, extended physical touch. The idea that someone could perform several minutes of CPR and leave absolutely zero traceable DNA behind stretches credibility to a breaking point. The defense's counter was that the absence of DNA from other people at the scene suggests either contamination or degradation, a general problem with the evidence rather than something specific to Adam. But the family's attorneys argued the point simply and effectively. If he was close enough to give CPR, his DNA should be there. It isn't. So either he didn't give CPR, which means he lied about that, or something else is going on entirely. Rebecca Zahau had 4 separate instances of head trauma documented in her autopsy, for distinct areas of impact on her skull. The official medical examiner, Dr. Jonathan Lucas, offered an explanation. Because there was evidence that Zahau went over the balcony in a non-vertical position, her head may have struck the balcony railing or structure as she fell. It was an awkward, sideways fall, he argued, which could account for multiple points of contact. but forensic pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht, one of the most decorated forensic experts in American history, a man who has consulted on the JonBenet Ramsey case and the Kennedy assassination, reviewed the autopsy and came to a starkly different conclusion. Wecht testified that the subgaleal hemorrhages found on Rebecca's scalp, hemorrhages on the undersurface of the skin, are not consistent with a hanging death or with hitting branches or a balcony railing during a fall. She has subgaleal hemorrhages, Wecht said. I see no reason why she should have those. You get those when your head strikes something or is struck by something. His conclusion: someone struck Rebecca Zahau on the head multiple times before she went over that balcony. Forensic consultant Dr. Maurice Godwin agreed, stating simply, the chances of bumping into the railing, going over the balcony, and hitting your head 4 times is highly unlikely. And Wecht went further still. He testified that fractures found in Rebecca's throat were more consistent with manual strangulation, hands around the neck, than with the forces produced by a hanging. In his professional opinion, the manner of death was not suicide. It was homicide. Cold case investigator Paul Holes reinforced the neck injury concern. For me, the biggest thing in my mind is the amount of damage to her neck. If this was a true long drop execution hanging, I would expect a lot more trauma. If not near decapitation, broken neck, internal decapitation. The evidence seems more consistent with manual strangulation rather than hanging. On the door of Rebecca's bedroom, painted in black block letters, was the message: "She saved him, can you save her?" Laboratory testing confirmed that the paint used on the door matched paint found on Rebecca's body. On her right hand, left breast, right nipple, right upper chest, and neck. Her thumbprint was found on the cap of the paint tube. The thumbprint is the cornerstone of the suicide theory. She touched the paint. Therefore, she painted the message. Therefore, she wrote her own goodbye. But attorney Keith Greer pointed to something the police glossed over completely. The gag in Rebecca's mouth had no paint on it. None. Think about what that means. If Rebecca painted the message herself, if she stood at that door, brush in hand or fingers dipped in paint, writing those words, and then gagged herself and tied herself up, the gag should have paint on it. It would have been applied after she touched the paint. But it doesn't. It's clean. What that suggests is that the gag was put in her mouth before the painting happened. Someone gagged her first, which means she was already restrained when the paint was applied. And Greer argued that someone pressed her thumb against the cap of the paint tube after she was already incapacitated, to create the appearance that she had done it herself. It's like somebody pinched her nipples, Greer said of the paint found on her breast and nipple area. She has black paint there. The positioning of the paint on her body, he argued, was not consistent with a person painting a message on a door. It was consistent with someone applying paint to her body after the fact. Perhaps the most disturbing piece of evidence in the entire case. Forensic specialist Lisa DeMeo, a former member of the San Diego Sheriff's Department's own forensic team, testified for the family's side at the civil trial. DeMeo testified that Rebecca's menstrual blood was found on all 4 sides of the handle of the kitchen knife recovered from the scene. All 4 sides. Not just the surface someone might accidentally brush against. All 4 sides, in a pattern, DeMeo testified, consistent with the knife being used as an instrument of sexual assault. The defense's forensic witness, Dennis Williams, also a former Sheriff's Department forensic technician, countered that the blood on the knife came from a cut on Rebecca's finger, which was still bleeding when crime scene photographs were taken, and that the blood could have transferred to the handle in that way. Once again, 2 experts with the same professional background arriving at completely opposite conclusions. The jury heard both, and 9 of them found the family's interpretation more likely. The San Diego Sheriff's Department maintained throughout that autopsies found no evidence of sexual assault. But Greer argued in opening statements that the evidence told a different story, one that the official investigation had been too quick to dismiss. Beyond the CPR mystery, there was another unexplained detail in the autopsy. Tape residue found on Rebecca's legs. Sticky, adhesive residue. The kind left behind when duct tape or similar material is applied to skin and then removed. But investigators found no tape at the scene. None. Dr. Wecht raised this point pointedly. Where is the tape and what was it used for? Let me give you 2 scenarios. One could say maybe she was going to bind her feet with duct tape and switch to the rope. But then where's the tape? And the other scenario is maybe somebody else was attempting to put duct tape around her feet when she was being subdued, and then took it off, removed the evidence, and took it with them when they left. The tape residue has never been explained by the official investigation. The civil trial began in March 2018 and ran for 6 weeks. It was exhaustive, emotionally devastating, forensically complex, and deeply, utterly riveting. Key witnesses on the family's side included Dr. Cyril Wecht, who testified that the throat fractures and head injuries were inconsistent with suicide by hanging, and that in his professional opinion the manner of death was homicide. Not expert Lindsay Philpott, who testified that the bindings were nautical in nature and consistent with the expertise of a tugboat captain. Forensic specialist Lisa DeMeo, who testified about the blood on all 4 sides of the knife handle. And the family themselves, Mary Zahau, who had spent 7 years driving this fight, who took the stand and told the jury about the woman her sister was. About the plans Rebecca had made for the next morning. About the phone call the night before she died. About the absolute impossibility, in her experience of her sister, that Rebecca would ever have done this to herself. Key witnesses on Adam's side included Adam Shacknai himself, who took the stand and maintained his complete innocence with calm, consistent detail. He described discovering the body, the shock, the desperate CPR attempt, his total bewilderment at being accused of something he says he did not do. Jonah Shacknai, who testified that it was inconceivable that his brother had any involvement in Rebecca's death. This is a man who had lost his son and his girlfriend within days of each other, who had to sit in a courtroom and watch his brother be accused of killing the woman he loved, and who still looked the jury in the eye and said, he didn't do it. Retired latent print examiner Linda Wright, who testified that Adam Shacknai's fingerprints were not found on any items at the scene. Not the rope, not the paint tube, not the knife, not the balcony railing. Defense forensic witness Dennis Williams, who challenged DeMeo's interpretation of the blood evidence. A defense not expert who disputed the uniquely nautical nature of the bindings. The jury sat through all of it. 6 weeks. Photographs of Rebecca's body. Forensic diagrams. Competing expert testimony. Legal arguments about the burden of proof. They deliberated. And then they came back. 9-3. In a civil case in California, that is enough. You don't need unanimity. You need 9. 9 jurors looked at everything. The knots, the DNA, the head injuries, the paint, the gag, the knife, the CPR, the tape residue, the throat fractures, Adam's account, the forensic experts, and decided that it was more likely than not that Adam Shacknai had touched Rebecca Zahau with the intent to harm her, and that his actions caused her death. The jury awarded the Zahau family $5.2 million. $5 million in punitive damages, plus $167,000 for the financial support Rebecca would have provided her mother and siblings throughout her lifetime. Outside the courthouse, the family's attorney Keith Greer stood next to Mary Zahau and said something important. He said this case was never about the money. I asked Mary at the end of the day, "Wow, what do? We got a verdict." And she says, "We got to get the case reopened, that's it. Our job's not done yet." Mary wept. 7 years of fighting. And a jury had finally said, "Yes, we believe you. More likely than not, this was not suicide. More likely than not, someone did this to your sister." For the Zahau family, it was the first moment in 7 years that the system had given them anything resembling acknowledgement. For Adam Shacknai, it was a verdict he rejected entirely and immediately. He announced he would appeal. His attorneys argued procedural errors and juror misconduct. He maintained, as he always had, that he was innocent. And the San Diego County Sheriff's Department? They released a statement the same day. The San Diego County Sheriff's Department stands by the findings of the medical examiner's office and our investigators. These findings were supported by forensic evidence and medical examinations. So the civil jury said, Adam Shacknai is responsible. The criminal justice system said, Rebecca Zahau killed herself. Both statements were simultaneously official. Both were on the record, and they were completely irreconcilable with each other. And because the civil court cannot order a criminal investigation, cannot arrest anyone, cannot change a death certificate, nothing changed. Rebecca's official cause of death remained suicide. Adam remained a free man. No charges, no arrest, no handcuffs, nothing. In the weeks following the civil trial verdict, public pressure on the San Diego County Sheriff's Office became intense. News coverage was everywhere. The family was speaking out. Journalists were asking hard questions. And the sheriff's office announced it would conduct a new, formal review of the case. for a brief moment, hope. But the review was not conducted by an independent agency. It was conducted by the same sheriff's department that had made the original suicide ruling in 2011. The same department, the same institutional identity, reviewing their own prior conclusion. The results were announced on December 7, 2018. Sheriff Bill Gore stood before reporters and stated, "After conducting this review, the case team found no evidence that would lead us to believe that Rebecca Zahau died at the hands of another person. In addition, we found no evidence that would dispute or be inconsistent with the finding that the manner of death was suicide." The chief medical examiner published a formal statement. The San Diego County Medical Examiner's Department has concluded that the initial investigative findings are well documented and correctly interpreted. The cause and manner of death in Rebecca Zahau's case remains unchanged. The family's response, through Keith Greer, was blunt. The decision was improper and biased. Mary Zahau Lohner said, "They did a bunch of busy work to make it look like they worked and did something, but they didn't do anything." And there it was, the civil jury on one side, the criminal justice system on the other, and not a single step closer to a criminal charge. Adam Shacknai filed his appeal of the $5.2 million verdict. His attorneys argued legal errors and juror misconduct. The appeal proceeded through the courts. For the Zahau family, this meant more uncertainty, more waiting, more of their lives consumed by a legal process that had already taken years. And crucially, a real risk that the appeal might succeed, triggering a new trial, with all the cost and emotional devastation that entailed. In February 2019, before the appeal reached its final arguments, the family made a decision. They settled. The civil case was dismissed with prejudice. The original $5.2 million verdict was legally vacated, erased from the record. In exchange, Adam Shacknai's insurance company paid the Zahau family $600,000. Adam Shacknai told reporters he had not participated in the settlement negotiations. His insurance company had handled it without his knowledge or consent, he said. "I'm probably the only one who cares about my name because I'm the only one who takes this seriously," he told reporters. He reiterated his innocence. When asked what he thought happened to Rebecca, he said he agreed with the sheriff's department's conclusion, though he was careful to add that he wasn't there and couldn't say definitively. For the family, this settlement was a devastating blow wrapped in pragmatism. They had fought for 7 years to get that $5.2 million verdict. And now it was gone, vacated, as if the jury had never spoken. As if 9 people had never looked at the evidence and decided that Adam Shacknai was responsible. Attorney Keith Greer vowed to continue. "We will be petitioning the medical examiner to change his opinion that Rebecca Zahau committed suicide to that she was murdered." The petition was filed. It was denied. Rebecca's death certificate, suicide. Still, always, good analysis demands honesty. So let's do what this case has always required. Sit with both theories genuinely and look at what the evidence actually supports. If it was suicide, Rebecca Zahau was shattered by Max's accident. She felt personally responsible. She had been alone in the house, the only adult, when a 6-year-old fell over a railing on her watch. At 12:50 in the morning, she listened to a voicemail, believed to be from Jonah, telling her that Max's condition had worsened and he was unlikely to survive. In the grip of overwhelming grief and guilt, in the darkest hours of the night, she decided she could not go on. She painted a farewell message on the door. She constructed a method of self-binding. Unusual, but police filmed a demonstration showing it was physically possible. She went to the balcony and went over the railing. What supports this? Her thumbprint on the paint tube. The police demonstration proving self-binding was possible. The absence of anyone else's DNA at the scene. The foot impressions on the balcony consistent with her bound stance. What works against it? The forehead injuries. The throat fractures that Weck says suggest strangulation. The gag with no paint on it. The tape residue with no tape. The CPR with no DNA. The absolute conviction of everyone who knew Rebecca that she would never have done this. And the plans she made for the next day. The food for Jonah, the call to her mother, the text to her sister. If it was murder, someone at the Spreckles mansion that night, and every piece of circumstantial evidence points to the only other person present, Adam Shacknai, attacked Rebecca in the early morning hours. He struck her 4 times on the head. He sexually assaulted her. He used his nautical expertise to tie knots she could not have tied on herself. He staged the scene. He applied paint to create the appearance of a suicide note. He dropped her over the balcony, and in the morning, he walked out and played the role of the horrified discoverer. What supports this? The jury verdict. The nautical knots, the forehead injuries, the throat fractures, the CPR without DNA, the paint-free gag, the blood on all four sides of the knife handle, the tape residue without tape, the loud music reported from the house that night. What works against it? Adam's fingerprints found nowhere at the scene. No DNA from any other person. His consistent, detailed, unwavering account. The total absence of any physical trace connecting him to the acts described. This is the maddening heart of the Rebecca Zahau case. The absence of evidence can be interpreted in either direction. Every piece of forensic data has a competing explanation. And in the middle of all of it is a woman who is dead, and a family that has never been given a satisfactory answer. It is 2025, 14 years since Rebecca Zahau died. The official record has not changed. Rebecca Zahau's death certificate reads, suicide. The San Diego County Sheriff's Office has stated they have no plans to reopen the investigation. Adam Shacknai has never been criminally charged. The civil verdict was vacated. The case is closed. But something important happened in 2025. Something that matters. Mary Zahau Lohner, Rebecca's oldest sister, the woman who has spent 14 years driving this fight, published a book. It is called Unraveling the Knots. In it, she presents never-before-seen photographs, court transcripts, autopsy reports, and forensic analyses. All of it building the case that the investigation into her sister's death was mishandled. That evidence was overlooked. That the San Diego Sheriff's Department reached a conclusion and then worked backward to support it rather than forward to find the truth. What I am trying to reveal with the book is the corruption of the San Diego Sheriff's Office, Mary said. The lies about the case. The lies to the family. I'm dying, but nobody knows when I'm dying. So, I will continue to fight as long as I am alive on this earth. I will fight for justice for my sister as long as I can. Think about that sentence. Hold it. A woman with stage 4 cancer, racing to finish a book about her murdered sister, because she is terrified she will die before the truth is told. I don't know what God's timeline is, and I don't know if I'll get to see justice on this earth while I'm still alive, but I would love to do so. Her father, Pu Kuan-nin Tang, Rebecca's father, died just 2 years after Rebecca. The family believed it was grief. A broken heart, in the truest sense. A father who survived a military dictatorship, crossed continents, built a life in America, watched his daughter build her own future, and then watched that future be taken from her in a mansion in California, and was told it was her own choice, and could not survive that lie. The younger siblings who were still in school when their sister's death made international headlines, who had to go to class while the world discussed their sister's bound and naked body, who grew up with that as their inheritance from the system. And Mary, still fighting, still writing, still speaking, still refusing to let the official record be the final word. I want to end not with a theory, not with a legal summary, not with a prediction about what might or might not happen next. I want to end with her, Rebecca Maui Zahau, born March 15, 1979, in the Chin Hills of Burma. Her name, in her language, means springtime beauty. She was the second of 6 children. She survived a military dictatorship. She crossed continents, Burma, Nepal, Germany, America. She learned languages. She built a career in a medical field. She fell in love. She made plans for tomorrow. Her sister called her the glue of the family, the one who held everyone together, the warmth, the person whose presence made other people feel more loved. She was 32 years old, and she deserves to have someone say, clearly, loudly, without qualification, that whatever happened to her in that mansion, the system that was supposed to find out failed her. It did not pursue every lead. It did not answer every question. It did not treat her life with the full weight of attention that a human life deserves. Whether the suicide ruling is ultimately right or wrong. And I want to be clear that the forensic evidence gives genuinely thoughtful people genuinely reasonable grounds to question it. The investigation left too much unexplained. Too many questions open. Too many loose ends accepted rather than pulled. And a family has spent 14 years paying the price for that failure. In grief. In money. In health. In years of their lives. A father who died of a broken heart. A sister fighting cancer while finishing a book. Siblings who grew up in the shadow of a headline. Mary Zahau Lohner's last words on this, as she fights to finish her fight. Don't give up when you know the truth. No matter how hard it is, you always have to fight for the truth, and you always have to fight for justice. She's right. And also, she's a daughter, she's an aunt, she's a sister, and she is loved by her family, her friends. I think people forget that. She's right about that too. We forget that. Show us your support for Show You More. Like and subscribe. And hope to see you next time.